Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy, and today I thought we would talk about some signs that show that you may likely have grown up in a narcissistic dynamic, in a narcissistic household. And oftentimes people, they will, especially in the beginning of their journey of kind of figuring out, something's up with my family, they'll gaslight, they'll question constantly, like, well, was it really that bad? Or things were good at moments, like it couldn't have been that bad, but then like you have all of these issues. So today we're gonna go through some signs that show that you possibly grew up in a narcissistic dynamic. Now, one of the first signs is that you're questioning if you grew up in a narcissistic dynamic. If you're questioning, then you most likely have dealt with some sort of abuse. You are dealing with some issues that you can't get to the root of. You're confused of why it's happening. You had a very back and forth household. There's positive and negative moments. So if you're questioning it, that is a major sign. Because people that grow up in healthy dynamics, they don't question, or they don't have cognitive dissonance of like, oh, like, my parent says they're a really good parent, but I also feel uncomfortable around them, or I have all these issues. What's going on? So you'll have some sort of cognitive dissonance and you'll question something's, what's going on with my family. Another sign is enmeshment. So I have a whole video on enmeshment, which I will leave right here. But when it comes to enmeshment, basically you and your family were enmeshed, and you guys all were kind of forced to have the same ideas, values, opinions, and if you didn't, then you would be shamed or guilted or made to fear having a different opinion, even maybe told that you can't be a part of them or part of the family, or they will kick you out of the family if you think any different than them, or they will belittle your opinions or just use scare tactics to make you feel like you can only believe what they believe in. And it may be even as extreme as you have to dress the same way. Basically, if you had any beliefs, values, or opinions or things outside of what they believed in, then you would face some sort of punishment, whether that's verbal or even a physical punishment. The next one is favoritism among siblings. So you may notice, and this could change at different times, but you may have noticed when one sibling was doing what the narcissist liked, or your narcissistic parent liked, then they would get special treatment, whether that was they would get extra hugs and kisses or love, or they would get, praise, and your parent would praise your sibling outside of the home, or they would get certain privileges that you guys all have wanted, and so you'll see this will change depending on who is pleasing the narcissist at the time. And here's the thing, when it comes to growing up in a narcissistic dynamic, you are all forced to go into certain roles, and each of you will do what you need to do in order to survive. And those roles, and I've talked about them so often, I have tons of videos on it, but it's the scapegoat, the lost child, and the golden child. Or at moments, your siblings will rebel. You may succumb to your narcissistic parent and do what you need to do, so that way you can receive some positive interaction with your narcissistic parent, or you may try to kind of go in the background and try to stay away from the narcissistic parent, so that way they kind of just do their own thing to your other siblings, which sounds rough, but you got to do what you had to do in order to survive. Like I said, these roles can change. You can stay in a consistent role throughout your childhood, or it could just change, consistently. So the scapegoat is the one that rebels. They may speak up, they may challenge the narcissist, and that's the one that gets the brunt of the abuse. That's the one that will receive punishment. That's the one that will receive the verbal abuse. That's the one that will get gaslit the most, belittled the most. That's when you're displeasing the narcissist, and that happens when you either do things that the narcissist doesn't want to be a part of, or you remind the narcissist of their negative qualities, and they want to distance themselves and dehumanize you, and so they will put a barrier between the two of you and make you feel less than. And then there's the golden child, which that's when you're in a role where you're pleasing the narcissist, you're doing something the narcissist really likes. Like maybe you can get them positive validation outside the house because you are the star soccer player, and so they will, you know, take you on trips or say like how amazing you are and just do all these positive things. And then when you do something negative or you don't do the exact positive thing they want, that's when you'll deal with the belittling and the devaluing. And then there's the role of the lost child, and that's the child that stays in the background and they try to stay away from the narcissist because they see what their siblings go through. And so that's when you'll see the favoritism, is when the roles change based on what pleases the narcissist at the time. Another sign is your siblings, you and your siblings will all see your narcissistic parent very differently. So what do I mean by that? You may, so you know, when you're in the household, and not only when you're in the household, when you grow up and you move out of the household, one will see your parent as like amazing, such a kind, like was the best parent to you guys. Another one of you will be like, no, like they sucked, like they did this and this. And then another one of you may be like, I'm kind of confused about what happened in our childhood. Like there's a lot of bad things, but then there's some good things, so I'm confused. And so each of you will have different and pretty extreme views in the differences of how you view your narcissistic parent. And there may be things that you can't talk about with your siblings because you guys can't match up because the views are so extreme and so different. And like you guys can potentially have a good relationship, and if you can't, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you guys may have like a good relationship, but when it comes to talking about your parents or dealing with situations when it comes to your narcissistic parent, that may create a lot of controversy and it may create distance between you guys. And there's, you know, the lucky ones where they all are on the same page and the siblings see the narcissistic parent for who they are. But it's more common for there to be differences in how you view your parent because you all were treated so differently in the household. And so obviously the one that was favorited the most, the golden child, they will see the parent as more positive than the other siblings, or the ones, because there's more than, if you have multiple siblings, there's more than one golden child. The ones that were more of the golden children in the household will see the parent as better than they actually were, and the ones that were more of the lost and the scapegoats, they will see more the negatives of the parent. Another sign is love was very conditional. So you had to earn your narcissistic parents' love. They may have talked often, oh, I love you so much, I love my children, I love my family. They're all talk. They may tell the neighborhood and all your friends and all the family and everything how much they love being a parent, they love their children, and they'll do anything for their children. But behind closed doors, you had to earn that love. You had to do things to get your parent to see you and to acknowledge you. And so that could be things like being the star student. That could be things like being the good qualities that a narcissist wants to be or views them as. Like it really just depends differently. Like maybe you're someone that has, you go and you work every day and you have money, so then they like love you because you give them money, and when you don't give them money they hate you. And so you have to do things in order to earn that love. You have to be exceptional, and the bar is always raised, so it's never like you're good enough. You always have to try to prove that you're good enough to your narcissistic parent. But unfortunately, and this has nothing to do with you, but to them you'll never be good enough because they have a deep wound inside themselves and they feel low. So because they feel so low about themselves, they try to make other people feel low, and because they can't feel good, they can't make other people feel good, especially their children. So then they'll always raise the bar because they're just looking for you to make them feel good. The next one is triangulation. So in your family dynamic, and this is what can cause the rivalries, and this is what can cause the extreme problems, is that your narcissistic parent would pin all of you guys against each other and like maybe share your secrets or help one of your siblings take another one of your siblings' stuff, or there was always something going on to get you guys to not come together, because once you guys come together, then they can be figured out. Then there's a team against the narcissist. So the narcissist wants to make sure that you guys can never team up and come together and become a unit to go against them. So they always have to do little tactics and little things and say little jabs and create problems amongst you guys, so that way you guys will always have a problem with one another. And this will happen throughout your whole childhood, and it will spill over into your adulthood, where you still guys will have this unhealthy dynamic between all of you, because they made sure to make sure you guys didn't have a healthy ground or healthy relationships with one another. And it wasn't even your battle, it was their battle. They were creating a battle amongst you guys, when you guys very well could have a healthy relationship, but they would turn all of you against each other to benefit them and to make you guys be on their side specifically and against one another. Another sign is image was so important. So you saw your narcissistic parent act one way in public and even try to encourage all of you and your siblings to act one way in public, but behind closed doors it was completely different. So in public, like, they would encourage you, you know, don't say X, Y, and Z, be polite, don't do this, do this. And it was like putting on a play. It was very scripted, and you were really encouraged to behave a certain way. And when you didn't, they would talk to you like, why did you do this? You shouldn't have said this. And you would be constantly coached on how to behave and how to talk. So like I was saying, what happens behind closed doors is completely different, because your narcissistic parent will talk themselves up and even maybe say positive things about you that they don't say to you behind closed doors. And so they act one way in front of people, and then behind closed doors there's more yelling. They don't do any of the things that they talk about that they do in public. You even see it like subliminally. Is like, for instance, they may be screaming at you and the door rings, and all of a sudden, like, they, like, you know, fluff themselves or whatever, and then they go to the door and they're like, hi, and they're all like polite. So then that subconsciously and subliminally tells you, I always need to be fake and hide what's going on. And here's the thing, this is there is a part that's normal. Like, yes, in other homes, like, obviously they don't want people to see their chaos. Like, we do have some shame, but when it comes to narcissistic homes, it's like so extreme, the differences, and it's too often. Like, people that are more in healthier homes, like, the parents may laugh and be like, oh, it's like a little chaotic in here, like, whatever. Like, they'll kind of like, they're more vulnerable about some of their issues, whereas with narcissists and a narcissistic dynamic, like, they have to cover it up and they have a lot of shame to it. And not only that, but it's further confusing, because you may have had people come up to you and be like, oh my god, your narcissistic parent, well, they obviously don't call it the narcissistic parent, but you're like, your parent is so nice and cool and whatever. And so then you're like, oh, people like say they're cool, and it unintentionally gaslights you to believe that there's something wrong with you and it's not your parent. The next thing is there was no boundaries. So you may have felt like you weren't allowed to say no. You maybe even weren't allowed to close the door. You weren't allowed to have, like I said, your own opinions or ideas. You weren't allowed to keep things to yourself. All these things, there was no boundaries that were allowed. And your parent may have used the excuse that they're your parent and they are entitled to information, even maybe as disgusting as entitled to your body, what happens to your body, like your hair. Or even I've seen people say that their parent would go and like make sure that they were taking a shower properly. Like, there was no boundaries. And boundaries are here to make us feel safe, so it then in turn made you never feel safe. You may have thought this whole time that you were really close with your parents, and like you didn't understand why you never really feel safe, but in reality, your parents were the ones who, or your narcissistic parent was the one who made you feel really unsafe. And it's not that you were close with them, it was that they took everything away from you and made them rely heavily on them. as a form of safety. So you may notice that you have separation anxiety, or even just you don't feel safe unless you have your narcissistic parent around. Maybe you don't trust your own opinions or your own views or your own ideas or your ability to function in the world. You may feel like you need their input or their advice, or for them to tell you what to do in order to feel safe. In reality, they don't know better. They cannot tell you what to do and make you feel safe. Like, as an adult now, you need to create that safety with yourself and trust yourself, because they created a lack of trust in yourself and with other people. They may have tried to enforce that you could only trust them and only listen to them. In reality, it was just they were trying to take control and manipulate you to do what they had wanted. Another sign is you are a people pleaser, and you often go into the fawn response, especially when there is confrontation. So this isn't just with all people. So you may be someone where it could be the extreme where you're overly confrontational. And that also is another sign that you could have had a narcissistic parent and you were the scapegoat, where you're overly confrontational, you're always ready for a fight, you're ready to, make sure there's justice, all of that to the extreme where you don't let things go. That's a sign. But it's also the freeze or the fawn response, where when there's problems, you immediately go to people pleasing and make sure that everyone else is good, or giving up things that you didn't want to give up, or putting yourself in compromising situations just to make sure everything's good, because you had to do that in childhood with your narcissistic parent and teeter over everything and tiptoe and walk on eggshells. And you may do that in a lot of situations. And it's not just in situations where there is confrontation and issues, but it also could be that you perceive there's potential issues. So even in job situations, you may often walk on eggshells or be afraid to speak up and go into that people-pleasing, freeze response around authority figures. Things in those situations you may notice. It's often just your immediate response to fawn or to freeze and to people please. And the last one is there's constant communication breakdown. There's constant confusing communication. So in your household, there is no real ever solution to any problem. It's always just your parent just has long lectures, or they just say everything that they think is wrong with you, or they just spit problems out. And if you try to confront them or come up with solutions, it goes around in a circle. There's word salad. There's just anytime you try to bring up a way that you guys can make things better, nothing can get better. They will not take accountability. And if you take accountability and you try to make things better, it's not enough. You still suck, because they're part of the problem. They're the main problem, but they are not doing anything to fix it. They're creating problems out of thin air. Maybe they're making stuff up, or they're not allowing anything to get better. And so they will create this constant confusing loop that nothing you do will ever work, and there's no way for things to ever get better, and you can never have a valid, good conversation with them. You can't have a deep conversation. They'll speak over you, or they won't hear you out, or they don't care what you have to say, and they're just always talking about themselves. Or if you're sharing something about yourself, they'll take over and talk about something about them, or they'll try to override you and like shame you for something you're doing, or try to give you advice, and there's just no real like hearing, validating you, and listening, genuine listening, and trying to make things better. Because you have to understand, their goal isn't to solve anything. You may be in a place where you're like, I'm sick and tired of these dynamics in the household. I just want things to get better. And your narc parent will be like, oh, I want things to get better too. They don't. They want to create and keep the chaos happening, because they thrive off of this chaos, off of the control, off of the manipulation, off of being a victim. That's how they get that validation. So they will continue this chaos, and they're the main creator of the chaos. So they don't genuinely want things to get better. They want you to be the constant problem so they can feed off of that. So that's why it's always better off not to engage when they're looking for a fight, or it's better to set boundaries and not try to share anything deep with them, because they'll use it to their advantage, like trying to give you advice and try to tell you how to live your life, or they'll use it against you as a way to control you and shame you. They generally use that information to their advantage. So when it comes to narcissistic family dynamics, it's very confusing because, like I said, there are good positive moments. It's not 100% terrible, and you'll go back and forth and be very confused, and a lot of your issues probably were very hush-hush and you weren't allowed to speak about them. So it can be very confusing for you as someone who has all these problems, but you also were taught, hey, don't talk bad about your family, keep everything in the family, don't abandon or don't betray your family. And you may feel like your family is all that you have. And so you can become terrified to even think negative things. And I've also talked about in the past that there's a part of you that it's hard to admit that there was something wrong with your parent, because when you admit something's wrong with your parent, you can feel very alone. And especially in childhood, you cannot admit something's wrong with your parent, because then who do you have? You're alone in this world. They're supposed to guide you and protect you. You have no more protection. So there can become a lot of you can form a lot of cognitive dissonance when you are facing that something could potentially be wrong with your family. So you'll try to explain it away so you don't have to deal with that pain and that confusion and like the reality that they were mentally unstable and they weren't healthy and you didn't have the childhood you had hoped for. There's a lot of pain to face. And I have a lot of videos on healing from this and facing this that I will leave right here. So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with someone that you think may need it. Until next time, thanks for watching. I gotta go into this phone. Bye guys. That literally felt like the Amanda show. Oh, what am I sitting on? Oh, just my dignity. That they have to be at a higher level than, what am I saying? What was I gonna say? I literally just completely lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was trying to say.